At 52, I believed my life had settled into a quiet cadence, like the steady drip of a faucet in a house long lived in. My name is Elizabeth, a senior accountant at a mid-sized marketing firm in Boston, where I'd spent 22 years tethered to the orderly world of spreadsheets, my days a tapestry of numbers, deadlines, and the soft hum of office machinery. My husband, Tom, was a good man, steady as the oak in our backyard, kind in the way he'd brew my coffee just right or leave notes on the fridge reminding me to rest. Our marriage was a familiar melody, its notes worn smooth by time, fraying at the edges, but still warm enough to cradle us. Our two children, Emily and James, were grown, off carving their own paths in distant cities, leaving our suburban home a quiet sanctuary of creaking floors, faded wallpaper, and the gentle rhythm of Tom's snoring beside me at night. Yet, beneath this stillness, a restlessness simmered, a longing I'd buried under decades of duty, responsibility, and the weight of being the woman everyone leaned on. I never imagined it would erupt so fiercely, nor that it would lead me into a betrayal so profound it would redraw the map of my soul. It began with Daniel, our new director, who arrived at the firm like a storm breaking over a parched landscape, stirring life into places long dormant. At 60, he carried himself with the vigor of a man untouched by the years, his silver hair swept back from a face carved with stories, his blue eyes sharp and piercing, as if they could unravel the secrets I'd kept even from myself. His presence transformed the office, a sterile labyrinth of glass walls, muted conversations, and the faint buzz of fluorescent lights, into a stage alive with possibility, its air charged with an electricity I hadn't felt in decades. I first noticed him during a boardroom meeting, his fingers tapping a restless rhythm on the polished mahogany table as he outlined his vision for the firm's future. His voice was a blend of command and warmth, like a hearth inviting you to linger. And when his gaze lingered on me a moment longer than necessary, my pulse quickened, a traitor to the calm I'd spent years perfecting. I scolded myself, blaming the flush in my cheeks on the room's stuffiness or the coffee I'd sipped too quickly. But the truth was a quiet thunder in my chest. Something in me had awakened, a spark I thought had long since turned to ash. Daniel's charisma was a quiet tide, disarming in its sincerity, pulling me under before I realized I was drowning. He'd stop by my desk with questions about budgets or financial projections, his smile easy, his cologne, sandalwood and cedar, rich and grounding, lingering like a whisper I couldn't ignore. Each encounter was a thread, weaving a web of temptation that tightened around me with every passing day. I'd catch myself staring at the way his cufflinks caught the light, glinting like secrets under the office's fluorescent glow, or how his laughter carried across the break room, a sound that stirred a longing I hadn't felt since my youth, when the world was a canvas of possibility. At night, lying beside Tom, I'd close my eyes and see Daniel's face, his features sharp in the darkness, and guilt would claw at my chest, a caged beast raging against the bars of my conscience. I loved Tom, or at least the life we'd woven together. The house with its creaking floors and rose-filled garden, the Sunday mornings spent reading the paper over coffee, our silences a language of their own. But Daniel was a fracture in the foundation of my world, a crack through which desire seeped, and I was powerless to seal it shut. The office became a theater of my silent torment, each day a performance of restraint played out on a stage of glass and steel. I'd sit at my desk, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, my eyes drifting to Daniel's office, where he'd stand by the window, his silhouette framed against the Boston skyline, the city's lights a constellation of forbidden dreams. His presence was a magnet, drawing me into a dance of stolen glances and fleeting touches, a hand brushing mine as he passed me a file, a smile shared across a crowded meeting room, a moment when our shoulders touched in the elevator, the air between us thick with unspoken hunger. Each interaction was a spark, igniting a fire I knew I should smother but couldn't. I began to linger at work, volunteering for late-night projects, telling myself it was ambition, a desire to prove my worth in a firm that often overlooked women of my age. But the truth was in the way my heart raced when Daniel's office light glowed late into the evening, the way my breath caught when he'd call me in to discuss a report, his voice low, his eyes searching mine as if he could see the storm raging within me. I tried to anchor myself to the life I'd built, to root myself in the familiar. I'd cook Tom's favorite meals, roast chicken with rosemary, apple pie baked from scratch, hoping the act of nurturing would tether me to him, to us. I'd sit with him on the couch, his arm around me as we watched old movies, his laughter a reminder of the man I'd vowed to love forever. I'd tend our garden, my hands deep in the soil, the roses we'd planted together blooming in defiance of my inner turmoil. But even in those moments, my mind would drift to Daniel, to the way his tie was always slightly askew, the way he'd rub his temple when lost in thought, the way his voice softened when he spoke my name, as if it were a prayer. The guilt was a constant shadow, heavy and unrelenting, yet it couldn't drown the longing. I'd wake in the night, Tom's steady breathing, a quiet rebuke beside me, and feel a pang of yearning so sharp it stole my breath, a hunger for something I couldn't name, but knew I'd find only in Daniel's presence. Our affair began quietly, almost imperceptibly, on a late evening when we were the last ones in the office, the world outside reduced to the glitter of city lights beyond the windows. A project deadline had kept us behind, poring over financial reports in his corner office, the air heavy with the weight of unsaid things. He offered me a glass of wine from a bottle he kept in his drawer, a gesture that felt intimate, dangerous, like stepping onto a frozen lake, unsure if it would hold. As we talked, not about work, but about life, our dreams, the roads we'd left untraveled, the air thickened with unspoken desire. He spoke of his childhood in Maine, of summers spent sailing with his father, his voice softening with a nostalgia that mirrored my own. I shared stories I hadn't thought of in years, my first job as a waitress, my secret dream of being a painter before practicality won out, the way I'd once danced barefoot in the rain, unafraid of the world's judgment. His hand brushed mine, and I didn't pull away. When he leaned closer, his breath warm against my ear, I felt myself surrender to a tide I couldn't resist. His lips met mine, tentative at first, then urgent. And in that moment, the world outside ceased to exist. Tom, the office, the life I'd built, all dissolved in the heat of his touch, like snow melting under a sudden sun. From that night, we were thieves, stealing moments in the shadows of the office, in empty conference rooms, in the stairwell where the cameras didn't reach. Our touches were fleeting but electric, a brush of fingers during a meeting, a whispered word in the hallway, a kiss stolen in the dim light of the copy room, the hum of the machine masking our quickened breaths. Each exchange was a spark, setting my heart ablaze, yet it burned with shame, a constant reminder of the vows I was shattering. I'd return home to Tom, his trust a silent accusation, his gentle touch a mirror to my betrayal. I'd lie awake, the weight of my guilt pressing against my ribs, a stone sinking deeper with every breath, yet even then, I couldn't stop. Daniel had awakened, something raw, a hunger I didn't know I still possessed. In his arms, I was no longer Elizabeth the accountant, the wife, the mother who'd forgotten how to dream. I was alive, vibrant, desired, a version of myself I'd mourned long ago, resurrected in the fire of his gaze. The secrecy of our affair was both thrill and torment, a double-edged blade that cut deeper with every stolen moment. I'd sit across from Daniel in boardroom meetings, my face a mask of professionalism, while my body hummed with the memory of his hands, the warmth of his skin a phantom against mine. I'd lie to Tom about late nights at work, each falsehood a splinter in my conscience, carving deeper with every utterance. I'd tell him I was mentoring a new hire, or that a client demanded last-minute revisions, and he'd nod, his eyes soft with trust, his faith in me a weight I couldn't bear. I began to avoid his gaze, afraid he'd see the truth in my eyes, the shame that clung to me like damp cloth. The guilt was a shadow, heavy and unrelenting, yet it couldn't drown the longing. I'd watch Daniel from my desk, his silhouette framed against the morning light, and feel a pang of yearning so sharp it stole my breath. I memorized the smallest details, the way his glasses slipped down his nose when he read, the way he'd hum softly, a tune I couldn't place, when he thought no one was listening, the way his fingers lingered on a pen as if tracing the shape of his thoughts. Each detail was a thread, weaving a tapestry of desire I couldn't escape, a portrait of a man I could never fully claim. Our stolen moments grew bolder, more reckless, as if we were daring fate to catch us, to force an end to what we couldn't stop ourselves. A weekend conference in Chicago became a clandestine escape, where we shared a hotel room, the world outside fading as we lost ourselves in each other. In those hours, I felt young again, my body responding to his with a passion I thought I'd outgrown, a fire that burned away the years. We'd lie tangled in the sheets, the city's hum a distant lullaby, and he'd trace the lines of my face, his touch reverent, as if memorizing me for a time when I'd be gone. We spoke of things we'd never dared in the office, of his strained marriage to Margaret, a professor whose world revolved around books and lectures, of my quiet discontent, the way my life had become a series of tasks rather than joys, of the lives we might have lived if we'd met in another time, another place. But the mornings after were cruel, the mirror reflecting a woman I barely recognized, her eyes haunted by the weight of her choices, her skin marked by a betrayal she couldn't wash away. I'd return home to Tom, his kindness a balm and a burden, his questions about the conference met with half-truths that tasted bitter on my tongue. I'd unpack my suitcase, the scent of Daniel's cologne clinging to my clothes, and feel a fresh wave of guilt, sharp and searing, like a blade against my heart. The affair stretched on for over a year, each day a tightrope walk between ecstasy and despair, a balancing act I knew I couldn't sustain. I began to see the toll it took, not just on me, but on Daniel. His smiles grew rarer, his eyes shadowed with the same guilt that plagued me, a mirror to my own torment. We never spoke of love, not directly, but it was there, in the way he'd hold me, his arms a fortress against the world, in the way I'd cling to him, as if we could stop time by sheer will. I wondered about his life outside the office. Margaret, with her sharp mind and quiet dignity, his grown son, Alex, who lived in Seattle, a stranger to the man his father had become. The home he returned to each night, with its own rhythms and routines, its own unspoken compromises. Did he lie awake as I did, wrestling with the same demons? Did he feel the same ache, the same pull towards something we could never fully have? I never asked, afraid of the answers, afraid of shattering the fragile world we'd built, a world that existed only in stolen moments and whispered promises. Our recklessness grew, fueled by a desperation to hold on to what we had, even as we knew it was slipping through our fingers. We'd meet in hotel rooms, on business trips, our time together a fevered escape from reality. But each encounter left me more hollow, the guilt gnawing deeper, a hunger that fed on itself. I began to notice changes in myself, lines on my face that hadn't been there before, a weariness in my eyes that no amount of makeup could hide, a tremor in my hands when I poured Tom's coffee. I'd catch Tom watching me, his brow furrowed, as if sensing the distance between us, and I'd force a smile, hating myself for the lie, for the way I'd turned our love into a performance. The office, once a sanctuary, became a minefield, every glance a potential betrayal, every whisper a threat. I lived in constant fear of discovery, of a colleague's knowing look, a misplaced email, a rumor that could unravel everything, my career, my marriage, the life I'd spent decades building. The end came abruptly, as endings often do, not with a dramatic confrontation, but with a quiet, inevitable surrender, like a tide receding from a shore it had once claimed. A colleague's suspicious glance in the break room, a whispered conversation that stopped when I approached, forced us to confront the fragility of our secret. Daniel called me into his office one evening, the city dark beyond the windows, his face drawn, his voice steady, but laced with a regret that mirrored my own. He spoke of the risks to our careers, our families, the lives we'd worked so hard to build. He mentioned Margaret, his son, the years they'd spent together, and I saw the weight of his guilt, a burden as heavy as mine. I nodded, my throat tight, knowing he was right, but hating him for it, hating myself for letting it come to this. He reached for my hand, and I let him hold it, memorizing the warmth of his skin, the faint tremor in his fingers, the way his thumb traced a slow circle against my palm. When he let go, it was like a door closing, final and irrevocable, the sound echoing in the hollow of my chest, a requiem for what we'd been. In the months that followed, I moved through my days like a ghost. The office, now a mausoleum of memories, each corner haunted by the echo of our stolen moments. Daniel's presence was a quiet ache, his eyes avoiding mine, his laughter no longer mine to claim. He was polite, professional, a stranger in the skin of the man I'd known, his warmth replaced by a distance that cut deeper than any words. I threw myself into work, into my marriage, trying to stitch together the pieces of who I'd been before. A woman who believed in vows, in loyalty, in the quiet beauty of a life well lived. I cooked elaborate dinners, coq au vin, tiramisu from scratch, planned weekends with Tom, tended our garden with a fervor that bordered on obsession, as if I could root myself back into the life I'd betrayed. I'd kneel in the soil, the roses we'd planted together blooming in defiance of my turmoil, their petals soft against my fingers, and try to remember who I was before Daniel, before the affair, before I'd broken my own heart. Tom sensed a change, though he never pressed, his kindness a silent weight I didn't deserve. He'd hold my hand during walks, his grip steady, and I'd feel a fresh wave of shame, knowing I'd tainted something pure. I began to avoid mirrors, afraid of the woman staring back, her eyes haunted, her face a map of choices she couldn't undo. The guilt was a constant companion, a stone in my chest, but so was the longing, a whisper of what might have been, a ghost that lingered in the quiet moments. I'd see Daniel in the hallway, his hair a little grayer, his shoulders a little more stooped, and feel a pang of loss so sharp it stole my breath. I wondered if he felt it too, if he lay awake at night, haunted by the same ghosts, the same bittersweet memory of what we were. Now, nearly 3 years later, I carry the weight of what I've done, a secret locked deep within me, a scar that aches when the wind turns cold or the nights grow long. The thrill of Daniel's touch has faded, a fire reduced to embers, but the guilt remains, a shadow that clings to the edges of my life, a reminder of the woman I became and the one I left behind. I look at Tom, his face lined with years of love and trust, his eyes still soft when they meet mine, and I ache for the woman I was, the one who believed in forever, who thought she was above such weakness. Yet, even now, a part of me mourns the fire Daniel ignited, the fleeting glimpse of a life I'll never know, a version of myself that burned brightly, if only for a moment. I see him sometimes, across the office, his smile a little sadder, his eyes a little more distant, and I wonder if he carries the same burden, the same bittersweet memory of what we were. I've rebuilt what I could, piece by piece, tending to my marriage like a gardener coaxing life from barren soil. Tom and I have found a new rhythm, quieter now, but stronger for it, built on the unspoken forgiveness he's offered without ever knowing the full truth. I've learned to live with the guilt, to carry it like a stone, smoothed by a river, heavy but bearable. But the longing remains, a quiet ache that surfaces in the stillness, a reminder that even at 52, my heart could still burn, could still break, could still yearn for something more. A truth as painful as it is undeniable. A melody that plays softly in the background of my days, never quite fading, never quite mine to silence.